President Trump signs a partial government funding bill, averting a shutdown. But lawmakers have 2 weeks to agree on what to do about immigration funding. The University of Illinois looking into campus college Republicans after a controversial Instagram post seemed to celebrate the killing of Alex Preddy. When the music's over, turn out the lights. A new study with some ominous findings for the future of Chicago's independent music venues.
Welcome to the Chicago Report. I'm Paris Schutz. Chicago's Marimar Martinez gets her day in Washington, D.C. Martinez testified on Capitol Hill about federal immigration agents and their use of force. Remember, Border Patrol shot her 5 times last October in Brighton Park. Martinez says she was on her way to donate clothes to her local church when she saw agents surveilling her neighborhood. She started honking her horn to warn her neighbors, who set off their car alarms. That's when she says things escalated and gunfire shattered her rear passenger window.
I knew I had to get to safety before I was dragged from my car and likely beaten or killed. I drove forward and went around the Border Patrol agents, who jumped out of his car and pointed his gun at me. I moved to the far left lane, striking the curb on the far left side of Kedzie. The next thing I knew, I felt a burning sensation in my arms, legs, and that I had been shot by pepper balls.
And tomorrow, a federal judge is expected to rule on whether body camera video from the October shooting can be viewed by the public. Remember, Martinez was charged, but then ultimately the DOJ dropped all charges as they could not prove their case. And back home, some Democratic elected leaders are calling on State's Attorney Eileen O'Neill Burke to prosecute federal immigration agents involved in the killing of Silverio Villegas Gonzalez and the shooting of Martinez. This comes after Mayor Johnson defended his executive order today that he says would set the stage for prosecution of agents that break the law.
I am doing everything in my power to provide any level of support that can ultimately lead towards justice and protecting the people of the city of Chicago. So, I don't see it as a disconnect. Look, Democrats know what our responsibility is in this moment, and it's imperative that we stand up for the working class, for the downtrodden, for undocumented families, for working people across the city and across this country.
And late this evening, a spokesperson in the Cook County State's Attorney's Office gave us this statement, quote, "Her office is committed to pursuing justice in all cases, including prosecuting police or ICE officers when they break the law or abuse their power. In such a case, the CCSAO will bring criminal charges if it receives evidence from a law enforcement agency that is supported under Illinois law. The office does not conduct independent investigations into criminal conduct and lacks jurisdiction over federal agencies, except in extremely narrow and limited circumstances. The office reviews evidence that is presented by law enforcement after an investigation has been conducted." All right, for this next story, imagine President Trump is in a grocery store. He grabs a jar of sauce and he smashes it on the ground. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt comes over to clean it up, and then President Trump takes another jar and smashes that one on the ground. That's kind of what happened today as the president doubled down on his desire to, quote, nationalize elections. Remember, Trump called into former FBI deputy leader and current podcast host Dan Bongino to tell him he believes Republicans should, quote, take over elections in 15 states. As we know, elections are controlled by state and local authorities and are decentralized for a good reason. Today, Leavitt attempted to clean up the claim, saying that the president just meant he wants to pass the SAVE Act, which would require voter ID in every state in order to present a ballot. But just hours later in the Oval Office, Trump grabbed that second jar and doubled down on his controversial wishes to, quote, nationalize elections.
Look at some of the places that horrible corruption on elections, and the federal government should not allow that. The federal government should get involved. These are agents of the federal government to count the votes.
Now, Trump made these claims despite the Department of Justice under Republican and Democratic administrations saying there is no evidence of widespread voter fraud or non-citizens voting. And this is amid multiple political controversies, the Epstein files, sagging polling numbers, and prognostications that the midterms are favoring Democrats right now. And in the latest installment of a year's worth of news in one single day, the president also signed a partial government funding bill that leaves the Department of Homeland Security out. It gives lawmakers about 10 days to agree on what to do about ICE and Border Patrol funding. And joining us now is Democratic Illinois Congressman Brad Schneider from D.C. Congressman, thanks so much for speaking with us. So in the next 10 days, will there be a deal with Republicans on funding for DHS?
That's up to the Republicans. If they're willing to work with Democrats to make sure that ICE is no longer terrorizing our communities, abiding by the law, dropping their masks, putting on the body cameras, not arresting people without warrants, targeting people strictly because of the color of their skin. If we can bring ICE into constitutional and legal authorities, then we can have a conversation. But what we're seeing in communities like Chicago, the story you just showed about them shooting residents of Chicago, what we're seeing in Minneapolis, where they killed 2 U.S. citizens, if they're going to stick to that, there's not going to be the funding.
When you say bringing these operations under stricter guidance, do you mean, do you support the notion of judicial warrants for enforcement actions?
And CBP, they're ignoring the Constitution. They're dismantling the Bill of Rights right before our eyes. And the First Amendment gives people the right to gather, to protest, to speak freely. The Fourth Amendment is a protection against illegal search and seizure. And what we're seeing is this administration saying, well, we don't care about the Constitution. We're not going to wait for a warrant from a judge. If we don't like the way you look, if we don't like what you're doing, if we think you're honking your horn too loud, we're going to arrest you. We're going to pull you out of the car. The stories we have heard over the last several days, I was talking to my colleague from Minnesota. She has a neighbor who's Hispanic, U.S. citizen, driving his car to work, stopped at a stoplight, and 2 officers jumped out of their car, ran up to him, pulled him out, threw him down to the ground. As he was saying, I'm a citizen. I'm a citizen. He had his passport in the car. They didn't care. They cited he was resisting arrest because he was wearing a seatbelt, and they drove him around for 30 minutes and left him far away from his car. That's not what you do in the United States. That's not how we treat our fellow citizens or even our guests. It's what you see in banana republics and totalitarian regimes.
But, you know, the Republican position here, as elaborated on by Senator Lindsey Graham, is that sanctuary city ordinances are contributing to the chaos. And if you just get rid of some of these sanctuary protections, you wouldn't see that. Do you support some kind of compromise on sanctuary laws?
The chaos is coming from ICE coming into our communities. We saw it in Chicago, where they're headquartered. We saw it in Waukegan, cities across Operation Midway Blitz. We're seeing in Minneapolis. They're going in, they're targeting people without a warrant. They're throwing them to the ground, and they're shooting folks. What would be the best thing to happen is for ICE and CBP and DHS in general to focus on keeping our borders secure. We all need border security. We want to make sure that we know who's in this country, and we should treat everybody in this country with the dignity they can expect as human beings. So what we're asking for is very reasonable. We're asking for police officers, as we have with our local police, to show their badge, to show their face. We're asking for, if there is going to be a search, if someone's going to come into your home, that they have legal authority from a judge that gives them the probable cause, gives them the right to come in and search in someone's home or in someone's car. That when people are taken into custody, they're treated with the dignity they deserve, not thrown. The conditions in some of these detention centers where you have 100 people in a cell, they're not given a blanket, they're not given a restroom, and they're not even accused of anything other than ICE didn't like the way they looked. That's what we need to do to lower the temperature and get back to a place where we're upholding the law, we're respecting the Constitution, and we're keeping our communities safe.
There's also disagreement in the Democratic Party. Some of your colleagues to your left, like Congresswoman Delia Ramirez, want to abolish ICE, or she's saying melt ICE. Are you in favor, or are there a large number of Democrats in favor of abolishing ICE?
No, there's a handful of people who are calling for things that are at the extreme. We need border security. We need to make sure we know who's coming into the country, that we're keeping out those who want to do us harm, that those who have stayed too long or help to either get right with the law or leave the country. But we should do it in a way that reflects who we are as a nation. And we're a nation of laws. We're a nation that is defined by the Constitution. Our values define who we are as a country, the character of our people. And what ICE is doing is not a reflection of who we are as a nation or what we want to project to the rest of the world. What we're seeing from ICE is what we see from places, other countries, totalitarian regimes, what we're seeing in countries that we have in the past stood up to and called them out for their human rights violations. We're now seeing those same violations here in the United States.
You're saying getting to an agreement will be contingent on whether Republicans want to meet you on some of these reforms, but are Democrats willing to shut DHS down after February 13th if that doesn't happen?
Well, what I've said is I'm not willing to give DHS another penny until they start respecting the law, until we start seeing behaviors from ICE and CBP agents that reflect what their mission truly is, not terrorizing communities, not targeting hardworking people living in our neighborhoods, working in our restaurants, stores, in our communities. They should be targeting the hardened criminals, the people who are a threat to our communities. And so I'm not giving another penny to ICE or to DHS until they start adhering to the law and accepting that Congress has constitutional authority for oversight.
All right, Congressman Brad Schneider, it's going to be a very eventful 10 days, and it's a very eventful every day on Capitol Hill. Thanks for joining us.
As you said, it's a year every day, but that's what we're here for, and I'm hopeful that we can bring ICE into control and we can get to an agreement.
Okay, well, good talking to you. Thanks very much for joining us.
Always good to talk to you. Thank you.
And back home, the University of Illinois is conducting a Title VI investigation of its campus college Republicans. This is after the group posted an Instagram message supporting ICE and featuring a drawing of the killing of Minneapolis protester Alex Preddy with a caption that read, quote, "Only traitors help invaders." Now, the college Republicans provided me written answers to some questions I asked them yesterday, saying, quote, "The image was AI generated and used as symbolic political imagery to convey support for law enforcement and national sovereignty, but not intended to depict a real event, a real individual, or to endorse harm or violence toward anyone." Now, this image was AI generated, they said, and joining us now to weigh in are Riley Graves, a member of the Campus Student Democrats, and Jesse Appleby, counsel with the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, a First Amendment group called FIRE.org. Thanks, both of you, for being here. First, Riley Graves, what was your reaction to that Instagram post that you saw from some of your fellow students?
Well, honestly, I was disgusted. As a part of the Illini Democrats, we very much protect the First Amendment right to protest. We have participated in rallies before. We've helped organize them. And seeing that attack coming from the other side of the aisle was disgusting. And it made me really nauseous as a student, especially.
And Jesse Appleby, how about your reaction? Then we should mention they took down that part of the post pretty quickly. What was your reaction?
I mean, I'm not going to comment on the actual content of the post other than to say it was protected political expression. Some people may be offended, but that is not the standard that we apply under the First Amendment. And this was protected political advocacy, and that's pretty much the end of the story.
And Riley, the university, as we mentioned, is conducting a Title VI investigation here to figure out whether there should be some kind of discipline against the group. What recourse would you like to see from the university?
I would like university reprimand, honestly. It's not fair that other RSOs on our campus are unable to collaborate and table on our quad with another unaffiliated RSO without getting banned for tabling for a year, but this RSO, our club, gets to depicting man's death, even though they say that it's not AI generated and not depicting Alex Preddy. It has been used in other social media posts to depict Alex Preddy. And also, it's just not fair to those who want to help and organize. It's inciting fear in our communities. The day the morning that post was posted was of a general strike rally where 1,000 Illinois students marched down our Green Street. It's inciting violence and it's striking fear into our community. And I would love to see the University of Illinois take action. I understand that the Trump administration may take away some of our federal funding, but it's not fair or just for the university to let this go by.
Jesse Appleby, you say that's the end of the story, that these are protected. This is a protected form of speech under the First Amendment. There's no doubt about that. But doesn't a university have the right to regulate the behavior of a campus group if it's to operate on within its campus?
A public university is bound by the First Amendment when it regulates public groups, and that means that it cannot restrict a group's speech or punish the group for speech that is protected. And this speech in particular, it does not rise to the level of incitement or a true threat or harassment or any of these small, narrow categories of unprotected speech under the First Amendment. So even though the university does have the right to regulate the time, place, and manner of speech on campus, it cannot punish this group for speech because others are offended by that speech.
Riley, obviously you and other students were offended by this speech, but I'd like you to respond to what Ms. Appleby is saying. I mean, this is protected First Amendment speech, and that's the end of the story. What's your response to that?
Honestly, there are parts of their statement that are protected under the First Amendment, right? But the universities also have to uphold Title VI. There were parts of that speech that called immigrants incompatible with Western civilization, demonizing an entire group of people coming into the United States. That is not protected free speech. That is hate speech. It's condemning an entire group of people just because they're not from the Western civilization, as they say. That should be punishable. And that's exactly why they're getting involved.
Riley, I think we lost you there. And I actually did ask them what they meant by, quote, Western civilization, because it can mean any number of things, and it has been used as a euphemism basically to mean white. But I don't know, that they did not elaborate on what they meant by that. But okay, Riley, you're back. So did you want to finish that thought?
I'm so sorry, I didn't realize what happened. But yeah, their statement with Western civilization should not be protected because it's demonizing an entire group of people. That is exactly what Title VI protections are for. It's to catch those things, especially RSOs have it's just putting that statement, and thousands of Illinois students disagreed with them. I mean, they showed it in their comments. They had 1,000 comments and 100 likes. It's not okay for RSOs to do that when we have certain things being pushed onto other RSOs, getting them disaffiliated from the university, getting them banned from tabling. Why is this not being pushed against this one?
And again, the university did say that they were reviewing this, and they have not said what their conclusion is yet. But Jesse Appleby, what about that? I mean, does anything in this post rise to anything that seems inside? You basically already said that you don't think that anything in that post rise to any kind of level of incitement. Can you explain to us what Title VI is and how that kind of fits in with federal law?
Yes, Title VI protects groups on the basis of race. It will protect, it protects individuals and groups of select individuals against harassment that rises to the level of a hostile environment. But that harassment needs to be discriminatory, and so severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive that it essentially deprives the victims of access to educational opportunities. That is not the case here. Speaking broadly about a whole class, a whole group of people, generally does not fall under Title VI, and it's not considered harassment. You need to be targeting specific individuals. So this would still be protected speech.
Riley, I want to ask you, what is the relationship or the climate on campus between the two groups, Democrats and Republicans? We know how polarized the country is. Do you get along? Are you able to, act cordially with each other?
I mean, yeah, and years before, especially after the death of Charlie Kirk, there was some form of cordialness. Actually, the Illini Republicans did not exist on this campus, or they barely existed before the start of this year. So this is the first time we've ever had negative or hostile interactions since my time on campus, because last year they weren't active. Turning Point USA kind of took the role of the Illini Republicans, but after Charlie Kirk's assassination, they kind of died out and have been replaced by Illini Republicans, which was founded after. or refounded. Sorry.
Very, very interesting. Okay, Riley Graves and Jesse Appleby, thanks so much for speaking with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And when we come back, we're breaking down a study that shows the majority of the city's music venues aren't making any money. Come back. Live music. It's a huge part of the cultural experience here living in Chicago, and it's also a big contributor to the city's economy. A new study says it generates $2.8 billion and $184 million in tax revenue. And new venues like the Salt Shed have added to the flavor here as classic venues like Metro continue to churn out the cutting-edge musical acts. There's one problem, however. Only 1 in 4 independent venues is profitable. Here to talk about the study is Billy Helmkamp from the Chicago Independent Venue League and the owner of Sleeping Village and The Whistler, two of the great independent venues here in Chicago. Billy, thanks for talking to us. So when we're talking about independent venues, what are we talking about here?
We're talking about mom and pop venues, independently owned and operated, not a, multinational corporation run space. Generally, independent venues are the people that run them, live in the neighborhood, live in the area, and are part of the community.
And I assume you mean, places that you don't have to go through Live Nation or Ticketmaster, some of those big companies, to purchase tickets and pay those exorbitant fees. Venues, you just walk into the door and the door person is there and they collect the cover and you go enjoy the show.
Yeah, it's a lot of the venues around town are like Cheers, that you walk in and the person taking your ticket or person working behind the bar, know your face, know your name.
And when you're saying 3 out of 4 venues here are not profitable, how dire is that for their ability to continue operating?
Well, it's hard to say, but it's certainly not something that a lot of venues can sustain for a very long time. Really, this study, the Chicago State of Live report, it's the first of its kind economic study of our city's independent live entertainment sector. We produced the study with Choose Chicago and the National Independent Venue Association. And like you said, it shows that independent stages generate $2.8 billion in total economic output, and they support tens of thousands of jobs locally and drive major tourism spending here in Chicago. But there's that caveat that most venues are operating on razor thin margins and just really struggling to stay profitable.
Why do you think that is? What's the biggest culprit here?
Venues are really expensive to run. That's one of the major points. And really, one thing that this study makes clear is that independent venues aren't just for fun. They're really more like a national infrastructure for culture, for jobs, for tourism, but without the protections and incentives that a lot of those other sectors receive. When 3/4 of our stages are operating without a profit, yet they're still generating those billions of dollars in GDP, wages, tax revenue, it just really becomes hard to justify leaving them out of the economic development and small business policy conversations.
And if you had the mayor's ear or city council's ear, what would you recommend to them in terms of policy that they can enact that would help these venues, become profitable?
There's a lot of different things. One of the biggest threats to live music right now is the way tickets are sold. Recent congressional hearings have highlighted both some of those issues and some really simple fixes, like a 10% cap on resale markups and an all-out ban on speculative ticketing. That's really the kind of common sense guardrail that we need so that our fans can really afford to go to shows.
Recently the city approved tens of millions of dollars in aid to the Congress Theater to rehab that old venue. Do you find that kind of questionable when you've got places like yours that already are here and operating and booking bands, and places like Metro and places like Buddy Guys or any number of places that are already here? Do we need more venues, or is that going to hurt the situation more?
I wouldn't say it's questionable. I would say when you look at what's happening right now with the Congress Theater, you can actually see what's possible when the city decides a venue's worth saving. If city council can assemble tens of millions of dollars for support for a single project, one that's operated by a global live entertainment conglomerate, I have to imagine that it also could create opportunities for smaller independent venues, the ones that are already here anchoring our neighborhoods night in and night out. And, listen, we're not against saving a landmark. We're just asking for the same creativity and urgency, be
Billy,
it through capital or tax breaks.
Billy, sorry to cut you off. We're out of time.
Programs.
That is our show for tonight. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great night.